What is going on, everybody? I'm figured out how to hook my headphones up to my microphone today, which took some work on my part, given my boomer-esque nature when it comes to technology. But I figured out how to hear myself and the computer at the same time. You'll love to see it. That's a productive day in my book. And I'm making this video. I wasn't planning on doing this video because I just spoke with Radix Virum on her show, Patriot Soapbox, or at least on her section of it, for 2 hours. So my voice is already a little tired. I have another big live stream tomorrow with someone else that I'm not going to jinx by naming it quite yet, but I'll post it afterwards. And we talked about a lot of things on the live stream today. A lot about orthodoxy, a lot about politics, and about how we should conceive of the state of America and conduct ourselves within it, given that I think most people can tell it's not going very well. Now, by either coincidence or divine providence or some combination of the two, during Lent, I decided to try my hand at reading this gigantic book called City of God by St. Augustine of Hippo, my patron saint, who I chose as my patron saint because there was really no other choice given his past and my past, and what a fantastic writer and thinker this guy is. So I'm going to do this video until my voice is completely done. Again, you can already hear it's a little bit worn out. But this was important, and it struck me to do this, and I wanted to do this and make this video. So I'm going to use the first half of the first book. City of God is 22 books. It's over 1,000 pages, almost 1,100 pages, 22 books. The first half of the first book is answering the age-old question, if God good, why bad thing happen? Now, if you're not familiar with that meme, it's a way that Christians kind of make fun of atheists and non-believers who look at the world and they ask a question that's actually very, very important. The problem of evil is one of philosophy's oldest problems, from what little philosophy I actually know and understand. It's not my bag entirely, but slowly picking up pieces of it here and there. The problem of evil, stated simply, is if God is good and omnipotent, why does evil exist in the world? Because if God is good and omnipotent and evil exists, then, I'm sorry, let me rephrase it. If evil exists, God must either not be good because he's causing the evil, or God is good but not omnipotent because he can't stop the evil, or he's not good because he's choosing not to stop the evil. So this is one of the oldest problems in all of philosophy that people have been trying to solve basically forever with absolutely no progress, except for within a Christian context. But even for a Christian, this is a tough question to answer. You know, we see the horrible things happening to individuals and to cities and to nations. And even in my less faithful, more doubtful moments, I struggle with this question, right? How can God be good and know everything and control everything and still let this happen? Of course, I snap out of those moods, thank God. But it is a question that's very, very hard to answer. Fortunately, my boy Augustine answered this question in 5 different ways, which I'm going to relate to you in a moment here. But if you're not familiar with this, I want to first explain the context of this book because it's important to understand why he was writing this stuff in the first place. So St. Augustine lived at the middle of the 4th century to the beginning of the 5th century. And he started writing this book after the fall of the western half of the Roman Empire, when a Visigoth named Alaric, sacked the Roman Empire and basically installed himself as king. Now, he's referred to as a barbarian in City of God, but in fact, he was not a pagan. He was an Arian Christian, a schismatic Christian who believed that Christ was a created being. A big problem in the Roman Empire and even in the modern world with Jehovah's Witnesses and people of that nature, and schools of thought of that nature, rather. So once Alaric sacked Rome, all the Western Christians, not all, but many Western Christians started fleeing and trying to find another place in the Roman Empire they could live and be Christian, Orthodox or Catholic Christian, it would have been called at the time, and not be potentially persecuted by Alaric and his Visigoths. St. Augustine was in North Africa, in Hippo Regius, and where he was the bishop till the end of his life. And so he was receiving a lot of these refugees from Rome into North Africa who had all kinds of problems with what was going on. a lot of them were complaining, okay, if Christianity is so great, why would the Christian emperor have been overthrown and why did our whole life get ruined, right? A lot of people grumbling about Christianity, even though, and this is an interesting point Augustine makes, I didn't know, in a very rare show of clemency or mercy, Alaric did not attack people who were inside Christian sanctuaries and shrines. So people could flee to these buildings and he would leave them alone. Even people who were not really Christian, who lied about Christian to be kept safe, were kept safe and then would come to Africa and whine about Christianity anyway. So Augustine yells at these people a lot, saying the only reason you're alive is because of your false association with the name of Christ. But the name of Christ still saved you from death. So maybe you should stop whining and be grateful. He says it a little bit nicer, but not that much nicer. Excuse me. And so he wrote this whole book to answer the question, how, if God good, why bad thing happen, right? If the Roman Empire was Christian, how could half of it fall apart and fall to the Visigoths, to people that were not part of our church? And so he answers this question with 5 major points. And this is all, again, in the first half of the first book, so the first 9 or 10 chapters. Before I get to the 5 points, he does have a couple other points that I'll bring up, because a lot of people were saying, maybe if we had stuck with the old Roman gods instead of this Christian God, maybe the empire would still be standing. Maybe this was the gods punishing us for apostatizing from Roman paganism. I got those words a little bit backwards there. Again, I've been talking a lot today. Roman paganism, if we'd stuck with that, maybe we would not have all these problems. And so Augustine points out, first of all, well, did you have any fewer of these problems when you were worshiping the Pantheon? Was there any less famine? Was there any less disaster, any less disease, any less war? The answer, of course, is no. All those things have been there basically all of the time, right? So the Roman Pantheon did not protect Rome from all these exact same problems. He also brings up the point that the Roman gods were essentially had to be protected by human beings. And he goes to pagan literature, specifically the Aeneid by Virgil and other books of that nature, to point out that a temple would be sacked, and it wasn't just a statue or representative of the god that would be taken somewhere else. It was the actual god itself, right, in the form of a statue or whatever the object may be, that had to be carried around and protected by humans. And so Augustine says, what kind of god needs human protection? How can those possibly be real gods, right? These are obviously not the true God. So he's rebuking them for their slipping back towards pagan beliefs a little bit. Once he clears those weeds out of the way, then he gets into the bigger point. So this is all about the nature of suffering and its relationship to Christianity and God, right? So the first point he makes, and I just read this on the chat earlier today, but I'll read it again. The first point he makes is that suffering is not the same thing for Christians or non-Christians. That even if the act may be the same, the disease may be the same, the scourge may be the same, due to the difference in the person, it's a completely different experience. And so I'll read you this whole paragraph. Though the sufferings are the same, the sufferers remain different. Virtue and vice are not the same, even if they undergo the same torment. The fire which makes gold shine makes chaff smoke. The same flail breaks up the straw and clears the grain. And oil is not mistaken for lees, because both are forced out by the same press. In the same way, the violence which assails good men to test them, to cleanse and purify them, effects in the wicked their condemnation, ruin, and annihilation. Thus the wicked, under pressure of affliction, execrate God and blaspheme. The good, in the same affliction, offer up prayers and praises. This shows that what matters is the nature of the sufferer, not the nature of the sufferings. Stir a cesspit and a foul stench arises. Stir a perfume and a delightful fragrance ascends. But the movement is identical. So what Augustine is doing here is subtly rebuking the people asking for not being real Christians, right? He's really saying, if you were a pious person, this suffering would have actually edified you and brought you closer to God, not cause you to blaspheme and whine about God and consider going back to some pagan non-Christian ways. So that's the first point that he makes, right? That the suffering is not the same, even if it looks the same from the outside. The second point he makes of why a Christian might suffer is he goes into this whole passage about Christians who fail to rebuke the lifestyles of the wicked and the sinful. And he says, sometimes it makes sense to do this. For example, if you think that rebuking someone in their sin is going to make them worse, or it's going to make them hate God because it's you saying it and they don't like you, or because of the way you're presenting it, then it could be considered an act of charity to not rebuke them for their sin. However, if you're failing to put them in their place because you're afraid that they're going to attack you, or they're going to steal from you, or they're going to kill you, then your weakness and cowardice is a sin in and of itself. And so perhaps some of the Christians suffering during the collapse of Rome had failed to rebuke sin when they had the opportunity to do so, even if they weren't partaking in those same sins that the wicked were doing, and if they weren't fornicating and adultering and getting drunk and doing orgies and what have you. They weren't telling people not to do that stuff either, which does go against our commandments, right? To save other people, either by gentleness or by fear, which the Bible says, right? Some you have to save by fear, pulling them out of the fire. So that's his second explanation. Maybe some of you were constrained, it says, by self-interest, not by the obligations of charity. So if you have failed to rebuke people because you didn't want it to come back on you in a negative way, well, this is something God may chastise you for with suffering. Let's see. Did I miss my points here? Hold on. I might have misnumbered my points. This is the downside of live streams. The upside is it's fun. You get to talk with people. The downside is if you get your notes wrong, you got to figure out what's going on. This kind of relates to the last point. That the good are chastised along with the evil, and God punishes moral corruption with temporal calamities. So it kind of blended into both of the last two a little bit, that both the good and the wicked suffer, but it's different. And you might not see the sin a Christian's getting punished for because it might be a sin of cowardice or silence instead of an overt sin. Actually, you know what? That's part of the same point. Part of the same point, just a little bit of elaboration. The third reason he gives is he uses the example of Job from the Old Testament. There is a further reason, Augustine says, for the infliction of temporal suffering on the good, as is seen in the case of Job, that the spirit of man may be tested, that he may learn for himself what is the degree of disinterested devotion that he offers to God. I have an icon of Job because I don't know how long you've been following my channel for, but you know that for about half of every year, I'm afflicted with this horrible allergy condition called cholinergic urticaria, where every time my body temperature increases, I break out in hives, and it's just like the worst thing. So I kind of understand how Job felt and why that suffering was allowed on Job, because it's very easy to believe in God when everything is going well, right? You got promoted at work, great relationship, you're super healthy, you feel good all the time, right? Very easy to believe in God when everything is going well and you see yourself as blessed. Much harder to believe in God, to have true faith in God, when the things that you value around you are breaking, such as your relationships, your bank account, or your health. So sometimes, Augustine is saying, suffering is sent to test you to see how much you really believe, or if what you believed was faith in God was actually just enjoying your comforts, which is something that I think all of us probably slip into from time to time. In fact, I felt convicted by this passage because I realized I've been tested by sickness, but I've never had all my possessions burn in a fire. I've never had anyone hold a gun to my head and say, turn your back on your God or I'm going to pull the trigger. So now, as much as I think I believe in God, I haven't really been tested nearly as much as a lot of other people have historically. So how can I say that I'm faithful and will believe in God all the way to the end no matter what, when the amount of testing I've been through is frankly not that much? Yes, my sickness is horrible, but it's not like I was sick and also homeless, right? that would have been a much more serious test. And as much as I would like to say I would still be faithful in that time, I don't know because I haven't been there. I'm not asking to be tested, God. I know you're listening to this stream because you hear all things. I'm not asking for hard testing. I'm simply saying, I'm just throwing out there that it's given me a moment of pause to consider the level of my true faith, right? What is the level of my devotion, given the level of testing that I've received? It's easy to say you believe in God when your life's going pretty well. Not so much when it's not going pretty well. So some of the Christians that suffered during the fall of the empire, he's saying, maybe it was God testing them to see how much they really believed. Another interesting point St. Augustine makes, this is not one of the 5 points, but it is an aside I wanted to include, is he mentions if everyone faithful were immediately rewarded with health and wealth and happiness, and everyone sinful were immediately broken in all of those ways, and it was very clear that believers are always happy and well off, non-believers are always miserable and broken. He says people would all believe in God, but for all of the wrong reasons. And this is another reason why it's not always clear from the outside who is prospering and who is not, right? You can have all this money and be broken and miserable. That happens a lot. You can have very little, be very happy and fulfilled, like many monks, right? And saints were ascetics. So that's another reason that it's not just belief in God equals happy, lack of belief equals sad, at least in an external observable way, because no one would develop real faith, even if they thought they were and wanted to develop real faith. In the back of their mind, in their subconscious, there would still be this calculation, plus everyone who believes in God has a really great life. And that's not what God wants. God doesn't want that sort of faith that's an expectation of reward, at least not in the temporal sense, right? Even expectation of reward in the eternal sense is not the highest level of love for God, right? The 3 levels of love for God are fear of punishment, which is the lowest level, desire of reward, which is the second level, and then just love of God as the highest level, right? I'm not doing a good thing because I fear hell. I'm not doing a good thing because I want to go to heaven. I'm doing a good thing because I love God and God says to do this, and I want to please God because I love him. That's the highest level of devotion. So that's just a brief aside there. Now, the 4th point he makes, he says, let me see. I'm going to switch pages here. The 4th point he makes is that the saints don't actually lose anything by being deprived of temporal goods. So that what looks like suffering from the outside, and this is connected to all the previous points, especially the first point, if 2 people lose everything they own, if one of them is a saint internally, he hasn't actually lost anything. Whereas a non-believer has lost everything that's important to him. So the suffering isn't reflective of what's happening inside. And he says the weaker characters who clung to their worldly goods with some degree of avarice, this is an interesting point, even if they did not prefer them to Christ, discovered in losing them how much they sinned in loving them. So he's saying even wholesome, pious people who don't prefer money over God, who do genuinely love God, might not have realized how much they still loved money until the money was taken away. And that proved to them that they were actually not quite as wholesome and pious as they thought they were. Again, this ties into the other points. Why does suffering exist? If God good, why bad thing happen? It's not bad if you're on the right track. That's kind of the overarching point of what he's been saying thus far in this book, is that it's not suffering in a meaningful, eternal way. It's suffering in a way that's meant to break you of your attachments to the world and bring you closer to God. And the 5th way, this is all in the first 10 chapters of book 1. There's like 40 chapters or something in this book. The last one, and this, I love the way he words this. No one has died who was not going to die at some time. So he's rebuking people who had the attitude that they were going to live forever until God abandoned them and they started dying in the collapse of Rome, right? He's making the point, reminding people, you're all going to die anyway at some point. And if you're saying that death in and of itself is the suffering, well, that's actually the end of suffering if you're on the right track, right? He says, death is not to be regarded as a disaster when it follows on a good life, For the only thing that makes death an evil is what comes after death. Those who must inevitably die, which is to say, all of us, ought not to worry overmuch about what accident will cause their death, but about their destination after dying. Christians know that the death of a poor religious man licked by the tongues of dogs, which I guess is supposed to be bad, that sounds like a fun time to me, is far better than the death of a godless rich man dressed in purple and linen. Why then should those who have lived well be dismayed by the terrors of death in any form? Tatiana, the book I'm reading from is St. Augustine, City of God, specifically the first of the 22 books. Marco says, please repeat that. It broke up a bit. I will repeat that. Christians know that the death of a poor religious man, licked by the tongues of dogs, is far better than the death of a godless rich man, dressed in purple and linen. Why then should those who have lived well be dismayed by the terrors of death in any form? So after he makes his first 4 points, he ends by reminding Christians that death is not to be feared, or as the band Demon Hunter might say, death is on my side. So he says, you might be suffering for any of these reasons, right? Either because you're not as wholesome as you thought you are more attached to your worldly pleasures than you realized, you failed to rebuke the sinful, or to test your devotion. Despite all of that, you're not supposed to be afraid of death anyway, because death is the end of all of our earthly troubles and concerns. So instead of being obsessed and worried about how you're going to die and when you're going to die, just worry about what happens after you die. No one escapes death, right? It doesn't matter how many of these like techno-transhumanism technologies come out. No one's going to escape death, right? We don't live in this world where you can upload your consciousness to something. I know it's popular in sci-fi. It's not real. And even if that does appear to be real someday, it's not going to be real in the way that they're saying it is. Allard says, the man who is licked by the tongues of dogs is Lazarus. He's referencing Christ's parable. I do know that. I just enjoy playing with dogs. So when I read that, I thought, well, that doesn't sound like too bad of a time to me. I am very childlike when it comes to animals and the playing with them. The book I'm reading from is St. Augustine's City of God. Welcome to the stream, everyone who got here after I finished the entire set of passages that I was reading. But the first half of the first book of this big book is meant to answer scared Christians' questions about, or confused and scared Christian questions about why God would apparently abandon the Western Roman Empire and have it fall in the early 5th century when Alaric and the Visigoths sacked it. Now, he's not necessarily saying that the empire collapsed because of sin, as if suffering is always a punishment for sin, which sometimes it is and sometimes it's not. Someone is just blowing up my phone over there, or my Instagram or something. I don't know. I put the phone all the way across the room and I can still hear it beeping. Very irritating. I should just turn the thing off, honestly. So throughout time, there have been many different theories on what causes the collapse of an empire, right? Is it turning from God? The Romans have certainly thought that for a long time, right? Turning from their pantheon of gods. A lot of them thought that was the problem. In the 19th and 20th century, a lot of people thought empires collapsed because of racial mixing and racial degradation. That was a big theory. When the truth is that the cause of an empire's collapse is the fact that it existed in the first place. Because we live in time and space, and all of these things are temporary. Thus far, none of the world's smartest people and philosophers have been able to prevent a nation from collapsing eventually. That's just not life on earth. If you read Ecclesiastes, he says very clearly, empires rise and fall, nothing new under the sun. Nothing lasts forever except for Christ and his church and his saints, right? It's fascinating to think about. The Orthodox Church has been around for 2,000 years. That's much, much longer than any particular form of any particular country has existed, right? Yes, you had dynasties and empires, but always with changing boundaries and little wars that they had to go through and all that kind of thing. And the church had its schisms and fights, but that was to prune off the dying branches, right? Someone says, Russian Orthodox thought the Bolsheviks were a punishment from God. I don't know the situation that Russia was in before that. It's an area of history that is still a hole in my knowledge that I plan on reading at some point. I know Tsar Nicholas II was in charge, but I don't know about the state of Russia. I can tell you I see America's current circumstances as punishment from God, certainly. And the suffering will separate the wheat from the chaff, which it's already doing to a great degree. And if you look at what our country does, I mean, it would be blasphemous to suggest that God would approve of this, right? America goes around forcing its sin down the throats of every country it can get its little claws around the throat of. Why would God bless this country? There's no reason. Why would God bless a country that forces gay marriage on Christian countries under the threat of sanctions? Why would God bless a country whose State Department deliberately caused a schism in the Orthodox Church in order to weaken Russia? I mean, it's very, very just for God to be destroying this country. Let's just be perfectly honest. This is justice, right? In the divine sense, this is justice. So ideally, if people stop doing these things, perhaps we'll be blessed. You know, we tried blessing Israel. That didn't work out too well. Worked out great for Israel. Not so much for America, though, because Israel is the church and not a secular state in the Middle East. Protestants don't want to hear that. That's okay. Have I read Rushdie's new book, American Pilgrim? I read it before it was published, in fact. Yes, it was an accounting of his tour that he recorded on video as Babylon Road. And it's a great story. It's a great book talking about the experiences he had in different cities and different events that he put on, and a lot of stuff about bird watching and walking around in nature. I definitely recommend American Pilgrim. So yeah, I would put that on your list for sure. Let's go through some comments here. If God based, why cringe thing happen? That's a question that I don't think any philosopher will ever get to the bottom of, frankly. Nice appearance earlier. That chat was something else. So I did not, when I was on the show with Radix and the Pinata guy, I could not see the chat. All I could see was the chat between the people on the call. Afterwards, people kept telling me that the chat was something else, like you're saying. I just watched Father Josiah Trenum's video from his Lenten challenge to not speak ill of anyone or judge anyone. So I'm not going to, I'll probably fail by the end of the night, frankly, because that's the hardest challenge I've ever heard. I'm not going to get into what the chat seemed to be once I looked at it after the show. I will say I got called a lot of names. I was referred to as the devil multiple times. And I think that a lot of people that really support Trump and really support Q were not expecting a guest on Patriot Soapbox to be as critical of those people as I was. I watched the Father Josiah video after my chat, so I don't count the chat as having failed necessarily, even though I was already trying to be charitable and not insult anyone. But I did. You know, I criticized Trump and Q a lot. And I'm going to do my best to not criticize anyone or judge them for their sins. That was the Father Josiah's challenge. Don't talk about anyone else's sins and don't judge them for it. God be with us. Lord have mercy. What a difficult challenge. But I'm going to do my best. And he said, if you screw it up, just, repent and try again. So that's all I can do. We got one guy saying good afternoon, one guy saying good evening. Clearly, this is being streamed in multiple time zones right now. I'm just waiting for a good morning, and then we'll have the full trifecta here. Concerned Westerner says, natural disasters may happen, but oftentimes we are given warnings to be prepared or leave, yet many of us fail to do so and then blame God for the consequences. That is a good point. That is true. Preppers get a lot of flack, but when the hurricane comes and no one else has food or water, who do you think everyone runs to for help, right? Okay, you were right after all these last 10 years. Good thing you have a whole warehouse full of preps. Can I please have some? Right? So you have opportunities, even right now, to buy stuff that you think might be helpful. Thank you for the super chat from Ball Enthusiast. Love your streams, Brother Augustine. Thank you, sir. It's amazingly unique how you can be equally engaging in solo streams as in interviews. You be shafting Eastern Standard Time viewers by streaming so late. Can't watch live, but will watch replay. That's true. I mean, I did an 11 a.m. Stream the other day just to see if there was a difference. And I have just as many viewers, but it's like the other half of the world that can actually watch it in the morning. The one with Radix was at 7 p.m. Eastern. That wasn't too late, right? I don't think you can replay that, though, because it was part of the 24/7 live stream. Excuse me. So there's no actual clipped video to go back and replay. But thank you for your compliment. It helps. So I've been doing a lot more live streams than pre-recorded and edited videos for a number of reasons. And one of them is because when I am interacting with people live, I have 2 to 3 times as much content per video because I can go on random tirades and rambles and tangents about all kinds of different topics, like the fact I'm answering you right now, that in a pre-recorded video, I have to be super focused on one topic. That's usually why I do it. Or in my last video on the occult video, I actually made a little slideshow about it. So there is some value to that too. But by and large, I enjoy engaging with the audience. And I like hearing your questions and comments and everything. So yeah, thank you. I'm just an unworthy sinner doing my best to share the things I've learned with others. And I have an interesting story to tell about that, actually. So I mentioned the other day that I sometimes feel as if nothing I've ever done, like the books or the streams or the videos, are actually doing any good. And I know that's not true, but sometimes I feel like it's true. Like, oh, I'm only reaching such a number of people, and other people do so much more than me, and comparing myself to others and their content and their output and so on. And then I was at a Bible study earlier this week where I heard a story about St. Augustine, my patron saint, that I never heard before and deeply moved me. So here's the story. Apparently, St. Augustine also had this feeling all the time, which for a guy who wrote hundreds of books, justifies the fact that I feel that way. If he also felt that way, I'm nowhere near his output, right? So I'm told by the subdeacon who told me this story, St. Augustine often felt this way. And he told this story without my prompting or saying I feel this way. It's just divine providence / coincidence or some combination of the two that I was there that night and he happened to be telling this story. He said St. Augustine used to often feel as if he had not done anything worthwhile. And so he wandered down to the beach, to the Algerian coastline, to meditate on life and I guess feel sorry for himself. And he saw a boy at the beach bending down into the water, picking up a starfish and throwing it into the water. And then this big wave would come in, this big tide would come in, and hundreds of starfish were being washed up on the beach. And the boy would bend down, pick up a starfish, throw it back into the water. Another big wave comes in, hundreds more starfish. The boy would bend down, pick up a starfish, and throw it back in the water. St. Augustine gets annoyed watching this. He goes up to the kid. He goes, "What are you doing, boy? Can't you see that you're not making a difference with these starfish?" And the boy reaches down, picks up a starfish, throws it back in the water, and says to St. Augustine, "It made a difference to that one." And I thought that was such a beautiful story because it really doesn't matter if you're not doing all the things for all the people, right? There are certain people that God put there in your path to hear a certain message at the time that's right for them. And whether that number is 1 or 1 million, it's still God's plan, right? It made a difference to that one. And hearing that story totally relieved me of this pressure that I was putting on myself to be constantly doing things and more and more and more and more and more. I mean, not that I'm that kind of writer anyway. I take my time and I put out the best thing I can. I'm not one of these people following I almost did it. I almost spoke ill of other people just there. Thank you, God, for the grace to catch myself. Let me rephrase. I'm not going to paint by numbers with my books and just have a massive output of stuff that is not the best I can do. I want to do the best I can, and then it will reach the people for whom it was meant to make a difference. Thank you for the super chat, Based Modalist. Welcome back. Your book on the Masons and their lies is great so far. Thank you. I'm more than halfway through already. That's amazing. You're a fast reader. You just got the book this week. I think on my last stream, you told me it was on the way, and now you're halfway through. People tend to read this book very quickly. Another person I gave the book to read it in 2 days. I try to make it an easy read. When I write my books, I try to take complex subjects and make them very simple and easy to read. And I try not to do the style of writing where you're showing off how smart you are by using words that the audience might not understand and forces them to look up words and stuff like that. I try to just make it super, super easy and make it about the reader and not about myself. That's what I try to do with my books. Making things easy to read is a hard thing to do. It's harder than just writing densely, I think. So I'm glad to see you flying through it, and I'm glad that you're enjoying it. I think you told me your dad was a pastor. If that was you that mentioned that, that's who the book is primarily for, people that can reach a large audience, some of whom may be Masons, and help explain to them why it is not in line with the gospel and with God's will. Reagan pagan, that's a new one. I think I said Roman. I meant Roman pagan, but I don't know. Sometimes I'm kind of, after 2 hours of talking earlier today, and it's an off day from the gym, so I'm not as enthused and energetic as I might be after like a 2-hour workout or something. I'm doing my best. Let's see. We got somebody talking about deism. He's saying deism answers the problem of suffering. I don't know about all that. We've got another super chat, then I'll come back to that. Thank you for the super chat. Oh, just $10. No comment. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. So one commenter is saying that the problem of suffering is answered through a deist worldview. I don't know. Let's see if anyone refutes that here. To quote Origen in one of his good points, the same heat hardens clay that melts wax. That's a really good quote. Origen has a lot of really good stuff. And I know that he was anathematized hundreds of years after his death. But a lot of the stuff he wrote, his commentaries on the Old Testament, are really good. His commentary on the book of Joshua, or the book of Jesus, as it's rightly called, is absolutely fantastic. Here we go, some rebuke of deism. Deism doesn't have a social structure either, just like maybe there's an amorphous God somewhere. No guidelines, no church, that's true. Compelling stream, thank you. Good evening and God bless, likewise to you. Finally catching one of these, thank you, Dr. Klaus Schwab. Hello, Borthers. I assume you meant brothers unless you're memeing, but hello to you as well. Finally get to catch you live. Why must you? Yeah, so the East Coast. I know. I live on the West Coast, guys, formerly called the Best Coast, but it sure isn't anymore. But my streaming schedule is whenever the mood strikes me, except that this week, I reached out to Patrick David Harry, Michael Sisko, and Luke Kendrat and said, hey, guys, I keep getting complaints that we stream at the same time. Let's coordinate schedules and make sure we're not streaming over each other so people don't have to pick and choose who to watch, because a lot of people watch all of us and want to watch all of us. So I don't think anyone's streaming right now. Cisco and Luke gave me their schedules. I'm still waiting to hear back from Patrick. But as far as I know, I'm trying to upload my spur of the moment streams while thinking about what time slots other people are streaming during. Right now, for now, that's the best I can do. Fellow Demon Hunter listener, absolutely. I love Demon Hunter, great band. I'll have to get this book. It's really good so far. I mean, the introduction took me like 2 days to read, but it was really, really good. And now I'm getting into the meat of it. I've read a couple books from Augustine. This is his magnum opus, I think he would probably say. It took him 17 years to write this. So it's long for a reason. Someone says only the bad part of the empire fell. Everything in this world is temporary. Yes. Hey, Michael. Hey, how's it going? You have a big ego. Well, pray for me then. I think the same guy who gave me $10 said you have a big ego. Why would you reward my sin? Doesn't that spur me towards further ego and pride? Maybe now Putin will build Byzantine again. I hope so. Ooh, 2 super chats at once. Thank you, guys. Are you familiar with Leibniz's theodicy? I know he's not Orthodox, but he's got to be one of the smartest people ever. I'm not. I'm going to put that in my Google tab here. I'm sorry, not Google. Brave. Oh, no, it is Google. Brave browser. Hickory Dickory, thank you for the super chat. It says, anathematized or not, Origen left an indelible mark on the church and the thinking of many great saints who came later. That's very true. He was like the teacher of several church fathers, direct teacher, as far as I remember. It's funny. You have Origen in the East and Tertullian in the West, both being absolutely pillars of the church at the time that they were around, teaching the church fathers, and then both spiraling off into heresy and getting anathematized. You hate to see it. Is the Old Testament Israel a republic or not before they wanted a king? I think it was run by judges. So I don't know. I guess it depends what you mean by republic. Not to pull a Jordan Peterson on you guys. It depends what you mean by republic. Someone emailed me after my Peterson Pajot stream asking me not to make fun of Peterson's voice, which they're right. It was very uncharitable of me. I said at the beginning of that stream, of the first half of the podcast review, I was going to try to be charitable, and I confess before God and before you, the audience, that I did not do a good job of being charitable in that first half. I tried to do a better job in the second half. Thank you for the super chat. Former Mason, esoteric experienced, cradle-born Orthodox. We should chat. P.S. Don't let these anti-Jewish comments get to you, little brother. You'll never know the impact you have on others. Little brother. I don't know. How old do you think I am? I don't know. I might be your big brother. Big brother in Christ. I guess if you're cradle Orthodox, technically I am the little brother since I'm new to it. But thank you for the encouragement. I appreciate that. I'm glad to hear that you got out of Masonry. You're welcome to email me if you want to tell me your story or anything like that. brotheraugustine1@gmail.com. I always enjoy hearing these stories of people who came out of the occult and followed Christ instead. The Orthodox also give a similar prescription, one guy says, to the fall of the Eastern Roman Empire. Byzantium fell due to their lack of faith as they tried to concelebrate with the Latins. There's also a lot of wars and stuff going on. I mean, I think it's hard to pinpoint one particular reason for why empires fall, except, like I said, the fact that they exist in the first place is the cause. Like the cause of death. No, I can't say that because the cause of death is the fall. I was going to say the cause of death is birth. Maybe in a temporal sense that's true, but in an eternal sense it's not. So that's a bad analogy, and I'm going to strike that one from the record, Your Honor. Tatiana says, yeah, I saw Josiah's challenge, and I think I may have failed already. Lord have mercy. Get back up and keep trying. What do I think about the book Spiritual Combat by Scupoli? I'm pretty sure I talk about this on every single stream. Spiritual Combat by Lorenzo Scupoli, which was orthodoxized over time and made Greek and then Russian and then English by Father Jack Sparks into the Unseen Warfare series of books, is my favorite set of books outside the Bible. I cannot possibly recommend it enough to every single person listening. By Victory in the Unseen Warfare, and then afterwards, Prayer and Virtue in the Unseen Warfare, 2 separate books. There is nothing that I have gotten more spiritual value from outside Scripture than that series, which had its origin in Spiritual Combat by Catholic monk Lorenzo Scupoli. So I haven't read the Scupoli version, but the Orthodox versions that I've read in English, fantastic. I can't believe my voice is still somewhat intact after what's now almost 3 whole hours of talking today. It's way more talking than I usually do throughout a given day. Hopefully my voice will be healed by tomorrow for my next major collab. Some people were open-minded and welcoming in the chat as well from my last stream today. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Sounds like it was a healthy and fun mix of people. Hickory says, Old Testament Israel was a loose tribal confederation under the rulership of various judges and sometimes unsanctioned monarchs. Another super chat. Thank you, sir. Love your work, brother. Thank you, Ben. Why the dislike for Catholicism? I'm an aspiring convert myself. I don't think I've ever said I dislike Catholicism in that language. What I can say is that having studied Christian history, I believe that Orthodoxy is the original church and not Roman Catholicism. But for the first 1,000 years of Christianity, they were both one church. There was only one church, right? The one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Over time, they split. The beginner's version is that they split in 1054. The more complex version is that various archdioceses broke away from Rome over several hundred years. And the extra advanced version is that there may never have even been a schism since the papal bull was dead. Come on, Michael, get your English together here. Since the Pope was dead by the time the papal bull arrived in Constantinople anyway. So it's not as clear cut as Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy became 2 churches in 1054. That's the 101 level. In reality, Antioch and Rome were still in communion until the 15th century. So if they had 400 more years, now there's a whole other layer of confusion. Okay, can Antiochian Orthodox venerate Roman Catholic saints from the year 1300? Technically, yeah. I think they probably could. You could justify saying that. Now, should they? I don't know. Ask your priest. I'm not a priest. I'm not a monk. I have no authority whatsoever. So ask your priest. What I dislike about no, dislike isn't even the right word. What I disagree with about Catholic theology is all the stuff Orthodoxy disagrees with, namely the Filioque, which was added into the Nicene Creed uncanonically, and essence energies as opposed to absolute divine simplicity. I also don't agree that the Pope ruling over the whole church was the ancient model. And I don't believe in the Immaculate Conception of Mary. I don't believe, what was the thing? Oh, and the Sacred Heart devotions. I understand why they're done, but I think it kind of separates the, body of the person from the soul of the person in a way that I can't quite wrap my head around. But I enjoy the Western Rite of Orthodoxy, which is the essentially English version of the traditional Latin Mass of Pope St. Gregory the Great, at least the one that's closest to me. It's still a couple hours away. So it's not the form of the liturgy that bothers me. I actually, in some ways, prefer the Western form because I like point A to point B to point C instead of the Eastern method of just circles. Like, if you're in an Orthodox service, there's never any way to tell where in the service you are unless you're familiar with it, right? What's that line they say? Let us complete our evening prayer to the Lord. And you're like, oh, it's almost done. And then half an hour later, you're like, that's not what complete means, man. Whereas in the Western Rite, it's like we do this part, then this part, then this part, then this part. It's very Western focused. I'm like, cool. And the priest says, all right, we start at 7, we're done at 9. Have a good night. Go home, everybody. God bless. Not the Eastern one of around and around and around we go. And the service ends and we'll do a half an hour of announcements and storytelling. And, that more Eastern mind is still kind of foreign to me in a sense of not being linear. So there's some things that I even appreciate and in some sense even prefer in the Western Rite or the Western liturgy to the Eastern liturgy. But it's what I see as innovations that were not there in the beginning that makes me prefer Orthodoxy over Roman Catholicism, if that makes sense. But, and I have to say this too, I also, I don't believe, how do I word this? I believe Christianity as a whole, in the present context of America, would be better served by teaming up against our common enemies and then worrying about theological stuff kind of afterwards. And I am not saying ecumenism theologically or ecclesiologically. I'm not saying that. I'm saying political ecumenism of, okay, we have disagreements, but we all agree that drag queen story hour is bad. Let's team up and fight that first. I would like to see that. I think we can argue about the Filioque once drag queen story hour is illegal. And I think that while we're fighting each other and not focused on stuff like that, it allows the devil to win completely unopposed, which is what he's been doing for 70 years in America, right? Unopposed victory after victory after victory. I'd like to see some teamwork without ever compromising on the truth of my beliefs. I could still easily team up with people of another, I can't really say another church or another denomination because that's not correct wording, of another group that calls itself Christian. I think I could say that. Yeah, I can go with that. Tatiana says, I've been trying to get prepped, also working on creating a close-knit community together as well. There you go. Love to see it. Hey, Radix is here. She couldn't get enough of me. 2 hours? No, I'm just kidding. They're a rough chat, even with me sometimes. Yeah, Radix, could you see the chat while we were talking? Because I could not see anything outside of me talking with you. I will upload it. Oh, you can upload the video separately? That's cool. Yeah, I meant to ask you, Radix. I actually don't even know your name, which is odd, considering I just talked to you for 2 hours today. Who is your audience? Is it Christians mainly? Is it mostly Orthodox? Is it mostly Protestant? Usually I'll try to address the audience with a thought given to who they are and what they believe. And I realized I just went in there completely blind and may have destroyed these people's whole belief system, hopefully in a good way, disavowing or getting them to disillusioning them of their false beliefs. But yeah, I don't really know anything about who that is because I don't have DLive. Also, I hope you got a few games of pinball in between then and now, because I would have played pinball between then and now. For those of you who don't get that, there was a pinball machine behind her in the video. Jesus never said not to be prepared. So that is a tricky point. So I have sometimes felt that prepping is sinful. I have felt that way sometimes, because really it's saying that I don't trust God to take care of me the next day and that I fear death and starvation. So there, you do have a point. You do have a point. I will chalk it up to my own weakness and lack of faith, but I'm probably still going to do it. Lord have mercy. I'll say this. There is a comfort that comes with having months worth of stuff that isn't there without it. A comfort from losing your job or getting banned from the internet, can't make money. A lot of fear goes away when you're like, yeah, I'll be fine. But it's probably not virtuous. Probably not virtuous. Unless you have a family. That's different. I don't have a family. So for a person who's living by himself, well, I'm not by myself, but I don't have children that I'm aware of. I don't have any dependents for people to take care of. So it's probably more sinful for someone like that than for someone who actually has a family to take care of. Cheers. God bless. Please keep doing these. Thank you, sir. What is the main difference between Orthodoxy and Protestantism? Oh boy. I mean, we're an hour in and that's a long conversation. So I think I'll have to save that one for later. Yeah, you have a big ego there. That one is good. Pray for me. Someone says Orthodoxy true, Protestant false. Yeah, I mean, that more or less sums it up. But again, it depends on what specifically you're talking about, because a lot of Protestants have a zeal and a faith that is not false. They just don't have the doctrine and the ecclesiology to go with that zeal and that faith. Will you ever go on Clubhouse? Probably not. Never been on it, never been to it. Stephen King roast? I don't know what that means. Thanks for the streams. I'll donate once I get some money. If you don't have any money, then don't give it to me, man. If you got bills to pay and it's like, whether you pay it or not depends on whether you give me 10 or 20 bucks, then please don't give it to me. Pay your debt off, pay your bills. I don't want to take anybody's lunch money, okay? I'm not trying to be the schoolyard bully here. In fact, I usually don't even remember to ask people to like and subscribe. I think I've remembered maybe twice in my entire YouTube career. I'm not trying to take your last few dollars. But if you can afford it and you want to help, of course, I appreciate that. Brother Augustine, you were one of those people that steered me back from Gnosticism. That made a difference. Thank you. I'm so happy to hear that. Glory to God. Am I on Discord? I don't have Discord. I don't have Clubhouse. I'm generally not on things where I'm like talking to people all day because I have a lot of stuff to do. I don't really like being disturbed unless it's something planned most of the time. I was on Signal for all of 12 hours and I got like 40 notifications back to back and I was like, nope, delete. This person keeps telling me I have a big ego. Thank you for noticing. I don't know what to say anymore. I've read this comment 3 times today. I watch all those ortho bros. You'd love to hear it. How about you and Cotel stream together? I don't know who that is. I lost my place in the comments. Wow. Yeah, about halfway through. Just got the 3 Unseen Warfare books today. Beautiful. People talking about origin, very significant, influential, very true. People arguing about deism. How did I miss this? I don't know what you're referring to. Do you think current scientific trends will lead into a resonance cascade? I know what those words mean individually, but not when they're placed in that order. Thoughts on Matthew Raphael Johnson? I've talked about that before. A schismatic priest who is a National Socialist, as far as I know. I don't want to mischaracterize somebody. Obviously, I don't agree with that worldview. Radix says it was funny, though. Radix, could you see the chat? I don't know if you're even still here. I don't even know if you're still here. Also, what is your name? Now that I've been on your show, who are you? Let's see. Okay, some uncharitable Peterson comments. I'm trying to do the Father Josiah challenge, so I cannot comment on that. What is your opinion on people who are nominally Masons but have been baptized and aren't active in Masonry but still see it as a neutral thing? My opinion is they should read my book because I wrote it so that they would realize it's not a neutral thing. Most Christians in Masonry aren't being consciously double-minded. They don't realize that they're not compatible. That's my opinion. They need to see the book. What is the best translation of Augustine's City of God? Well, I have not read all or even one of them completely, but this Penguin Classics version that I'm reading, Radix is tired of seeing this because I talked about it 4 times in our chat. I like this translation a lot. I understand it, so, if it's dumb enough for me, then I'm sure the rest of the world can understand it too. Comment, 1848 was a terrible year. Yes, I remember that one. No, I don't. No, I do not. Finding the Church Jesus Built series you recommended was well worth the watch. Thank you. It is. I just recommended it to another person today. Your shirt looks familiar, like something Roosh would wear. Well, it sounds like Roosh has good taste in shirts then. Funny side note, I've had this shirt I think since college. There are pictures of me from 10 years ago wearing this shirt and a number of other shirts in my closet as well. Because why buy new shirts if I still have ones that work? What do you think about the Orthodox Church's response to vaccines? I don't know if it's made a formal response to vaccines. I can tell you I'm not getting it. I think they said ask your doctor and talk about it with them. We cannot team up with other sects because it implies unity of faith. I don't think it does. Father Peter here constantly pushes this, the one exception being perhaps opposing pro-choice because it's just that bad. Okay, I don't think it implies unity of faith. It implies that we all agree on a particular topic. Pro-choice is a good example. Should we not team up on that? Should we not team up on Drag Queen Story Hour? I think we should. I mean, Father Peter here is a priest, obviously, and a wise one. So I don't know. I'd have to chat with him and see what the specifics of his argument are. But I don't think that it implies unity of faith. Brittany says, again and again, Christ repeated himself several times over. EO helps us get it. Not vain repetition, but rather honoring the repetition of the word in prayer. Lord knows I need it. So we got some defense of the Eastern Rite repetition here. I know it's not vain repetition. My point was simply that as an inquirer, after you sit there for an hour and a half, much longer service than you're used to, and you hear, let us complete our evening prayer to the Lord. You're like, sweet, okay. And then half an hour later, it's not done yet. But you know how I am with things on time, my rigorous scheduling type of personality. So one of the things I'm neurotic about is things being done when they say they're going to get done. Oh, Stephen King writes by numbers. Oh, I see what you're saying. He's a very interesting guy. Very interesting guy. And I am... Every time I get to the end of the comments, there's 100 more comments, which is good. It's good to have participation. Looks like Radix disappeared. I asked her name, and it's a secret. It is a secret. She said, I can't answer that. I got to get out of here. Cotel is David Patrick Harry. Oh, Church of the Eternal Logos. I see. I thought it was Patrick David Harry. I don't know. On Telegram, he's Patrick. I've actually never had a conversation with him, but I could talk to him at some point. It would make for a big Chad energy stream. I know he lifts, so you do love to see that. Orthodox lifting crew in the house. Is there a possibility to increase testosterone levels naturally without TRT? Yes. Not during Lent, but eating red meat and working out, especially working out leg day. Don't skip leg day because leg day stimulates hormones. Squats, compound lifts like that. Strength training, executive boost tea for a short while after training. Pine pollen, also, big fan. Enjoyed your analysis of JP and Pajot. Peterson got me on the right path, but I'm kind of amazed. I used to listen to him so much, considering he says so little. Can't even follow his thought process. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed my analysis. All right, I'm starting to fade here. It's been 3 hours of talking today. I see there's still a lot of questions and comments in here. Let's see. I'll read one more. I'll close my eyes. I'll scroll around. Who's going to be the lucky comment? Boom. It was pertinent that the second Eve and the second Adam be without original sin. Okay, so this is a defense of the Catholic doctrine of the Immaculate Conception, which, for those of you who don't know, the Immaculate Conception is not about Jesus, it's about Mary. The doctrine says that God gave a special grace to Mary's parents, Saints Joachim and Anna, so that Mary would be born free of the stain of original sin. This doctrine was so foreign and alien to historic Christianity that the doctrine of papal infallibility had to be introduced just to justify promoting it. So many people argued with this when it first started being promoted, that the Pope said, well, papal infallibility, and I said it ex cathedra, so it has to be true. So no, I don't believe in either of those doctrines, papal infallibility or the Immaculate Conception. That said, I am going to take a break because I have to preserve my voice. For tomorrow, please pray that tomorrow's stream goes through. It's been a long time in the making, and we've tried it before, didn't work, and hopefully this time tomorrow at 1:30. Was it 1:30? Yeah, 1:30 Western time. We will have a nice stream. So thank you all for being here, and for those of you who watched my chat earlier today, much appreciated. Thank you all for the super chats and the comments and the questions, and I will see you guys all shortly. Have a good night, happy Friday, and God bless.